Let's see who can save you. A tattooed stranger ripped a waitress's shirt, but Hell's Angels saw it. The diner was nearly empty that night, save for a few late-shift workers and a tired couple hunched over their coffee. The neon sign outside flickered, casting intermittent shadows across the greasy linoleum floor. Behind the counter, Marissa wiped down the countertops for what felt like the 100th time that evening, trying to ignore the gnawing anxiety that had settled in her chest. It had been a long week. The diner had seen more drunk arguments and petty fights than usual, and Marissa's manager had warned her about a group of bikers that had been spotted in town recently. But she had learned the hard way, fear was useless in her line of work. You smiled, you served, and you survived. Then he appeared. He walked in with a presence that seemed to suck the light out of the room. A stranger, tall, broad-shouldered, tattoos snaking up both arms like living maps of someone else's life, and eyes that gleamed with the kind of intensity that made people uncomfortable. His leather jacket creaked as he moved toward her station, each step deliberate, like he owned the floor beneath him. "Evening," he said, voice low and rough, almost a growl. He didn't smile. Didn't make any effort to look friendly. Just stared. Marissa felt a chill crawl up her spine. She kept her smile in place, though it trembled. "Evening, sir. What can I get you?" "Coffee." "Black," he replied, leaning on the counter, the faint scent of leather, smoke, and something darker trailing from him. She poured it, hands slightly shaking, and set it in front of him. That's when she noticed the small group of men in the corner, all leather, all unmistakably Hell's Angels. They were laughing quietly, sharing cigarettes and glances that spoke volumes. Marissa swallowed. Something told her trouble was already brewing. The stranger's eyes drifted over the diner, finally landing on her. "You," he said, pointing a finger like a gun. "You're going to regret serving me wrong." Marissa stiffened. I haven't." But before she could finish, he moved closer. Too close. Too fast. In one sudden motion, he grabbed the edge of her uniform shirt and ripped it down the middle, exposing her plain white undershirt. Her heart thundered in her chest as she stepped back, trying to cover herself, her voice catching in her throat. "Hey!" someone shouted from the corner. The biker gang had noticed. But the stranger didn't care. He leaned in, close enough that she could feel his breath. "Let's see who can save you," he hissed. The words were like ice in her veins. For a moment, the diner seemed suspended in time. The flickering neon lights reflected in the biker's sunglasses. A drop of sweat slid down Marissa's temple. And then, movement. One of the Hell's Angels, a tall man with a braided beard, stood up, placing a hand on the table. His brothers followed suit. Their presence filled the room like a storm rolling in. The stranger's lips curved into a smirk. "Ah. Friends of yours?" he asked, voice dripping with amusement. The biker shook his head, voice calm but dangerous. "No one touches her." Marissa didn't know whether to be terrified or grateful. The stranger laughed, a low, dangerous sound that echoed against the diner walls. "Bold," he said. "I like that." Before she could register what was happening, the biker with the braided beard moved first. A single step, measured, precise, and the stranger spun around, fists raised. The two men circled each other, predators gauging the other's strength, while Marissa slipped behind the counter, clutching a coffee pot like it was a weapon. "You shouldn't have done that," the biker said, voice low, steady, dangerous. His brothers spread out, hemming the stranger in, their presence enough to make anyone's skin crawl. The stranger's grin widened. "Oh, I think I should have." And then it happened, the first punch. It was brutal, quick, and efficient. The stranger was strong, but the Hell's Angels were trained for this, their movements almost choreographed, each punch, block, and kick precise. Marissa could barely keep track, her vision spinning as the coffee pot slipped from her hands. She could hear the shattering of porcelain on the floor, the dull thuds of fists hitting flesh, the grunt of effort and pain. She wanted to scream, to run, to hide, but something in her chest told her to stay. To watch. To witness. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the stranger staggered, caught off guard by a particularly vicious combination. One of the bikers, a woman with fiery red hair tucked under her helmet, landed a decisive blow, and the stranger crashed into a booth, his leather jacket sliding across the floor like a dark river. Marissa's hands shook violently, adrenaline making her feel simultaneously frozen and hyper-aware. The stranger's eyes, still gleaming, met hers. "This isn't over," he muttered, before staggering to his feet and moving toward the door. But the bikers weren't done. They blocked his exit, forming a wall. One of them, the tall man with the braided beard, stepped forward. "It is over," he said. "For tonight." Marissa exhaled, finally feeling the tension in her chest ease. Her shirt was torn, her hands scraped and bruised, but she was alive. Safe, for now. The stranger gave her one last look, a mixture of amusement and warning, then disappeared into the night. The bikers didn't follow. They stayed behind, ensuring she was unharmed before returning to their corner, their presence suddenly calm and protective. "You okay?" the red-haired biker asked, kneeling slightly to meet Marissa's eye level. I think so," she whispered, her voice shaky. She looked around, realizing the diner had returned to its normal rhythm, the flickering neon back to mere background noise, the few other patrons pretending they hadn't seen anything. "You don't have to thank us," the braided beard biker said, leaning against the counter. "But next time, don't be afraid to call for help. There are worse things than getting a shirt ripped off." Marissa managed a weak laugh, brushing a strand of hair from her face. I'll remember that." For a moment, there was silence. The neon sign buzzed softly above, casting its pale light across the scene. And then the bikers stood, moved toward the door, and disappeared into the night as suddenly as they had arrived, leaving Marissa alone with her racing heart and the remnants of a near disaster. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by the warmth of gratitude and the shivering aftertaste of fear. She didn't know who the stranger had been, or why he had singled her out, but she knew one thing: some nights, the line between terror and salvation was drawn by the unlikeliest of heroes. And sometimes, it was the people you least expected, the tattooed strangers, the shadowy bikers, the people society labeled as dangerous, who reminded you that survival wasn't just about strength. It was about courage, timing, and the willingness of strangers to stand up when the world seemed intent on tearing you down. Marissa straightened her torn uniform and wiped at the small cuts on her arms. She wasn't just a waitress anymore. She had witnessed something primal, something human, and she had survived. And as the neon lights hummed above her, she realized that sometimes, being brave wasn't about fighting back alone, it was about trusting that someone else might step in, just when you needed them the most. The diner returned to its quiet hum, but the memory of that night, the ripping of the shirt, the flashing tattoos, the looming threat, would linger. It would remind her, always, that danger could appear in the blink of an eye, but so could protection. And as for the tattooed stranger, Marissa never saw him again. But sometimes, when the wind howled just right, and the neon lights flickered, she thought she could hear his laugh echoing in the night, a warning and a challenge rolled into one. "Let's see who can save you."